Well, Adam, thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with me to discuss a few topics. For those who don't know, you are a video producer for one of the most recognizable film festivals in the world, the Toronto International Film Festival. When I figured that out, I said, hey, you know what? This is a guy I need to talk to. So can you just start off by saying what you do at TIFF, what your responsibilities are, what your day-to-day is like, and how you made the shift to remote work for a production the size of TIFF, especially heading into the 2021 season?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, since the pandemic hit, my day to day very much shifted, around March of last year and what we do. But generally speaking, so I'm a video producer at TIFF, along with, we've got a couple other video producers. And we sort of just oversee all video content that comes out from the festival. So that could be, trailers for the programming that we're running. It could be interviews with filmmakers. Obviously, during the festival itself, we put together like a highlight reel. The biggest change, obviously, in the last year is that we started doing a lot of live streamed Q&As and conversations with filmmakers and talent. So we oversee that. So yeah, basically just any piece of video that comes out from TIFF, there's a very good chance that myself or one of my colleagues has touched that.
And what different forms of video are you working with? I know you personally have touched trailers, industry retrospectives, videos for social. What is the gamut of video content that your team is creating?
Yeah, I mean, like you say, it's a whole gamut. Like it could be anything, anything and everything. Like what the things that we focused on a lot pre-pandemic were our Studio 9 interviews. So that's when we would have talent in the building, be it an actor or a director or a writer or whomever. And we bring them upstairs and we just have like a sit-down conversation with them. And that conversation might be edited into a 5-minute deep dive into their film. It might be, we might have just also, I'm thinking of an example of an interview I did with Alex Gibney, documentary filmmaker. So we had a conversation with him about his film, and that was like an 8-minute piece or whatever. But then we were also, that winter, we knew we were doing a retrospective on Martin Scorsese. And we knew that he was a big Martin Scorsese fan. So I asked him a few questions about that. And then we were able to make sort of short little social clips that are, a minute and a half, 2 minutes about him talking about his favorite Scorsese piece. So we always sort of try and, when we're doing those interviews or whatever, we're trying to get as much bang for our buck and as much different types of conversations out of it while still sort of focusing on one major theme. And then, yeah, again, sometimes it's just one of my favorite pieces that I did was a tribute to Edgar Wright. It's called The Signature Moves. It's part of our Signature Moves series. And it was just basically sort of like, what are the common themes and threads and visual styles that you're going to see in his film? So it meant I got to go back and rewatch all of his movies kind of with a fine-tooth comb, like literally going in some cases like frame by frame. And I was discovering like so many hidden little secrets that his visual style is so unique, and there are so many of those things to discover that it was so much fun. And then sometimes it's even just like silly stuff. One day we were having a screening of, I think it was Notting Hill, the Hugh Grant and, why is her name? I can't believe I can't remember her name. Julia Roberts, excuse me. Yeah, so Hugh Grant and Julia Roberts movie. And, the running gag is that Hugh Grant just stammers through every movie. So I as a joke, was like, I'm just going to edit every single time he says, and it ended up being about like 8 minutes long or something like that. And then we just put it out on Twitter as a sort of like a joke. So, and it was, of course, immediately it was super well received. So it's, like I said, it can run the gamut from like very sort of educational, like, education was maybe not the right term, but like in-depth conversations about film to a silly little social video that we think our followers will just get a kick out of.
That's interesting. So let's stay on that for a second. What is the creative process like to produce a video for TIFF? Let's use the Hugh Grant example. That was your idea. You executed on it. How much free reign do you have to produce stuff like that?
Quite a bit. Like it really sort of, it does depend on what we're talking about or what we're doing. Obviously, there are also various different teams throughout the organization. So it's about staying in touch with like the programming team, because obviously everything we do, we want to be in support of our programming. But at the same time, if the social team notices that there's like a trend happening that is about something that maybe we're not showing in the building right now, but we know we'll maybe show it in a few months or whatever, like we'll sometimes hop on that. So it's really just, it's very collaborative. in that Hugh Grant piece was like, I came up with this silly idea thinking like, there's no way anybody's gonna go for this. And I think I edited like just a minute, and then I sent it over to the social team and I was like, I've been doing this, like, is this something you would even want? And they're like, yeah, run with it. Like, let's see how it turns out. And then of course it ended up being like a very popular tweet of ours. So yeah, it's nice that we sort of have this ability to, whatever ideas we come up with, we can sort of throw them out there, and generally they all sort of end up happening. I always joke that some of what I think are my dumbest, silliest ideas that no one's ever going to go for always tend to be the ones that, for whatever reason, someone says yes, and then it gets the most traction. So that's one of the great things, is just, yeah, we have a lot of creative freedom in that regard.
And on a side note, since we just talked about Edgar Wright, how excited are you for Last Night in Soho?
So excited. I'm so excited. In fact, it's funny. Edgar Wright was on. I'm a big, huge Seth Meyers fan, and he was on Seth Meyers last night talking about his new documentary about the Sparks Brothers. And it's such a gut punch because it's, available in theaters in North America only. Like, it's one of those, they're not doing an on-demand thing, so I don't know when we'll get to see it here in Canada, but hopefully soon. But yeah, I'm so excited for Last Night, and so it looks so cool. So
yeah, I'm actually in the same boat as you. Edgar Wright is my favorite director.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, I like a good indie feature, but I really appreciate how Edgar Wright can entertain audiences while still showcasing his knowledge of technical filmmaking. He understands the balance of art and entertainment, but, that's an aside. To get back to this conversation, what's one aspect about your job that people might not know?
Yeah, it's so funny because you sort of present some of these questions, and I'm looking them over. Excuse me. I was like asking my coworkers, I was like, what is something, like, it's so hard to know, because to me, I know all of the stuff that I do. And so to think of like, what's something that someone doesn't know that it's like, well, it's hard for me to think about that. I think one of the things that is kind of unique to our position at TIFF is that we are, as video producers, we're both sort of like, we're an in-house marketing team as well as an original content team. And in some organizations, those teams would be split. You would have people who are dedicated just to creating the marketing, people who are just created to original content. Whereas we sort of have to wear both hats. So it's like, it's really paramount that you have both skill sets, like the ability to create an interesting piece of original content that people will want to sit and watch and enjoy on its own on YouTube, as well as the ability to create, a 30-second spot for the festival or for our year-round programming. That's one of the things that people don't necessarily know about TIFF, is that we are actually a year-round organization. We don't just exist during that 10 days in September. At least back in the old days, we ran films all year round downtown Toronto. Now we have an online platform where you can rent movies and watch them online. But that's another huge thing, is like, it's not just about the festival. It's about all this other stuff that we do, all the initiatives that we support, like our Share Her Journey campaign, or our, For the Love of Film Fund, or the various other charitable aspects that we're doing. It's a lot more involved than just those sort of like that 10 days in September that obviously everybody looks forward to. But some of the stuff that we do year round is just as exciting, if not more, because we get to, dive a little bit deeper into those things that we at the organization love so much.
Well, that's a perfect segue, because TIFF is just around the corner, a couple of weeks away. How are your days shifting now that you're leading up to the event?
Yeah, obviously, as we get closer and closer to the event, we start to wind down sort of our day-to-day, year-round work, and we start rolling into festival mode. And so much of that is, again, starting that marketing. A lot of it in this stage, this early stage, is all about the marketing and getting all of those assets up and running, because we have a lot of in-house and out-of-house ads. Because we're an international film festival, we're obviously, the reach is much wider than just Toronto, like it would be year-round. So there's a lot of time being spent working on festival creative and all of that stuff that's involved, but then also just planning the logistics of how we are doing things. The other thing, too, is that being on the video team, a lot of our assets have to be delivered in advance. So we have to really get started a lot sooner than other, also like the design team, obviously, like when there's print aspects, it's kind of similar. You have to, if everything's going to be ready to go for the first week of September, it kind of actually has to be completed, the first week of August, so that you can have that sign off process. You can get those final deliverables sent off to where they need to go. So yeah, I mean, right now we really are. It's really a focus on getting that marketing campaign started and getting those assets created and delivered. And then as we get closer and closer to the festival, it will be focusing more and more on the things for the festival itself, like we do festival creative animations and all the sort of in-house stuff that you would see when you're at a screening. All that stuff has to be built, and that's the thing that I guess people don't necessarily, going back to your previous questions, like, again, everything you see someone from our team or the design team has to create. Like, none of that stuff exists in a vacuum, and there's someone behind every one of those little elements. So it seems all seamless, and like, I, even as someone who previously attended the festival, like, I never really thought about that. Like, every time you see something on screen, like, someone has worked so hard to get that up there, and like, it's gone through so many revisions and all that. So there is a lot of sort of behind the scenes work that people don't probably even realize is happening to ensure the most seamless, wonderful experience possible.
Okay, so September hits. What is happening in your day-to-day now that the event is up and running? I'm assuming that with all the screenings and all the interviews, you're getting a large influx of videos coming your way. As an editor, how do you prepare for all that?
Well, I'll talk about this in terms of previous years in a non-pandemic year in a sort of more traditional festival environment, just because that's the most experience that I have, obviously, but also it's the more interesting way of how things work. So yeah, my role specifically during the festival is I'm responsible for handling the closing night wrap-up trailer. So at the closing night film, we sort of show a trailer, essentially a highlight reel of the past 10 days. And then we also obviously put it online, but it's basically meant to be like, here's everything that's happened. Here are the wonderful things that have happened over the last 10 days. So my role throughout that leading up to the festival is to focus on that. So what that means is I'm spending a lot of time just every night, they finish filming for the day at all the different venues, all the different Q&As, all that stuff, all that footage comes in. We have a team that offloads that material and sort of organizes it. And then I come in the morning and I take that, it's probably close to like 6 hours every day worth of material. I take that material, and then based on the priorities that I've spoken with the programming team and the various other teams, the social teams, the marketing team, like, I start going through all the material and seeing what I can find for what's going to work for that. Along the way, I'm also doing deliverables to the social team, because they will sometimes, similarly, they want to have little highlights from the day before. So you're sending that material off. And then we also have, as you mentioned, we have talent coming through the building doing interviews. So sometimes I'm helping out with the shooting of that. Sometimes I'm helping with actually conducting the interviews. So it's sort of like you're wearing several different hats all throughout that time. And then basically it's just, it's this going through your material as fast as you can so that you can actually put together this highlight reel. And the thing is, because of the way we have to deliver everything, as I mentioned earlier, you actually have to deliver it a few days in advance of the closing night, because it has to get a DCP made, it has to be sent out to all the venues. So it's like, it's not actually a 10-day timeline, it's really more like a 5-day timeline. And so you're trying to do as much as you can. So there's a lot of late nights, long hours, but it's also so much fun, because it's just like you get to see so much of this. You kind of get to experience all of the festival, whereas other people, you really have to pick what you're going to see, whereas I get to see everything, because I'm seeing the stuff that everybody else got to film and do themselves. So yeah, those 10 days are jam-packed, and they are exhausting, and you eat a lot of takeout and drink a lot of caffeinated beverages, but it's so worth it in the end, and it's definitely the highlight of the year for all of us.
Yeah, that's a busy couple of days. So what are you doing in the lead up to prepare for all the videos that are going to be coming your way? Are you doing anything on the front end of your editing software to make things more efficient? Are you taking notes? Can you just talk a bit about your process to get yourself up to speed for the day of?
Yeah, I mean, it again, it kind of depends. Like, last year, we knew going into it that because everything was a mixture of digital and physical, we were going to have to approach everything differently. So, we had a script, which we don't normally have. We had a shot list going into stuff, so that because we weren't going to be covering every single day with the same level of we weren't gonna have 6 videographers at every location every single day. Like, we were having specific shoot days because we were trying to be as cognizant of the pandemic as possible, and abiding by the guidelines. So we went into it a lot more planned last year than we normally would. That's not to say that it's not normally planned, but the way it usually ends up working in a regular year is like, it's just a matter of, here's all the footage, and try and put the piece. I always refer to it, it's like putting together a jigsaw puzzle without the picture of what it's supposed to look like, and also a couple other jigsaw puzzles thrown in there as well. So it's like, it really is a search and find, and we really, like, I rely on our assistant editors a lot. They help go through the material, as well as like my coworkers who are actually attending events. If they were at a screening and something great happened, then they will let me know, so that I know, okay, I got to go jump to that screening and see that moment, and pull that for the trailer. The way I tend to work is, and I use Final Cut Pro 10 for the, I guess it's now just called Final Cut Pro, they dropped the 10, but for this trailer, I always use that because it allows me to ingest the footage a lot quicker. The way it allows me to organize is a little bit different from other software. And I'm basically doing all my front loading in advance. Like, I'm going through all the material and sort of highlighting what I like, and delegating between sound ups and visuals that I like. And I basically do that for 4 or 5 days. And then finally, when time is basically running out, I say, okay, well, now I got to start editing. But because I've done all of that heavy lifting in advance, I really can just, like, I go to my sound ups and I say, okay, this is good, 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 put those in. And now I need some visuals. Okay, I like this. And that editing, the actual editing process comes together so much quicker than it would if I were working a different way. So it's a lot of sort of organization and sifting up front that isn't very exciting, and it's kind of tedious, but it means that I can work and get an actual edit out the door in so much less time. So it's a different method of working than other editors approach it, but it's worked for me. It's worked really well for the last few years, and I honestly can't imagine doing it any other way at this point. My very first year, the sort of editor who had done it previously was sort of telling me how he would maybe approach it. And I was just like, I think I'm going to try it this way and see how it goes. And it's just, I'm glad I did, but I can't really imagine doing it any other way at this point.
So I saw a video that you uploaded on your personal YouTube where you're showing how you set up your Final Cut Pro project to be more efficient. When you're working on commercial projects or anything on the side, or even for TIFF, do you consider yourself to be a process-oriented editor, or do you just let the frames speak to you and you just go off the cuff?
Yeah, I mean, it really sort of depends on the project and the time, especially the timeline. Like, the timeline sort of dictates everything. If I've only got a day to do something, I edit very differently than if I've got a month. But yes, I think I am process oriented in that most of the time I'm working without an assistant editor. If I'm doing a commercial job or whatever, there's not going to be an assistant editor. It's probably just going to be me. And so I have to do, like I said, a lot of that heavy lifting of organizing and syncing and labeling and all that sort of stuff. And I could sort of half-ass it if I wanted to, because ultimately nobody else is touching my project, right? Like, it's like, well, I'm the only one, so I don't have to be organized if I don't want to be. But I do find that the more organization and upfront work I do, again, that sort of secondary, the actual edit process goes so much quicker. And where I really notice it is especially for when I'm doing, say, a commercial job, where I'm getting notes, because like for the festival trailer, like, there are very few notes. It's because of the compressed timeline, and I've been there so long and I know what needs to be done. The notes are usually pretty minimal. But if you're doing a commercial, you've got to get notes from your creative director or the directors of the commercial, as well as the client. Like, there's a lot more involved. So I find that the more organized I can be, if they say, this shot isn't working, what can we swap it out with? Well, I can immediately pull up all the different takes from that, including the 3 ones that I highlighted as being the best. It just allows me to sort of make those changes and get that process done so much quicker. But yeah, like, there's also been times where there's just not enough time to do that sort of thing. So it is just like, and my project is a mess, and it's about getting it out the door. But yeah, if there's time and there's, I know that there's going to be those sort of revisions and stuff. It's just, I do like to sort of take that time and do it. And then also too, I have the benefit of a lot of the time, I get to be on set. And so I'm doing that sort of upfront work as we're rolling. So like I'm taking those notes and making those notes myself in an Excel spreadsheet that I can then feed into a piece of software that matches it up with the edited, or the raw footage, and sort of does all that assistant level work for me. And when I can do that, that's my favorite way of doing things, because it's like, A, I get to be on set, which is always just fun. But B, it means I can usually start editing the day we wrap, because all of that work is done. I don't have to spend a day going back through the footage, labeling, organizing. It's just all of that stuff is done, and I can just start cutting, which is the part that I like the most anyway.
I'm glad you brought that up, because you are a post professional who is fortunate enough to be on set. How does that experience benefit your editing process? And for the times that you can't be on set, what are you looking for in a producer to relay notes back to you so you can be more efficient when you're back in the studio?
I think it's all about time. And I know so often now, like timelines have gotten shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter, especially for post. So, as I said, when I'm on set and I'm able to take those notes and make sure those notes are up to date and accurate, I can, like I said, I can literally start cutting the second we wrap. When I'm not on set, then there's usually a day at least of time spent going back through the material, labeling it, organizing it, all that stuff. So you're saying it is kind of a six of one, half dozen of the other, because it's like, well, is it better to pay my editor, for a couple extra days in post world to do that organization, or pay him to be on set to do that? It's that's really the trade-off that I guess the producers have to sort of make. But I also find that, of course, by being on set and being that much more familiar with the material, like it really does, I think it allows me to work much faster on the back end, and actually is saving time and money, because there's so much less time spent trying to find stuff, because I was there, I know. And I'm having those conversations with the director on set. They can be like, that's definitely the one, take that, like, and okay, I know that. I won't even look at the other takes, because that's the one we know we like it. Whereas if I'm not on set, they can provide those notes, and I've been in situations where that's the case. I couldn't be on set, and someone is on set taking those notes for me and passing them along. But it's not the same, because it's, sometimes it's like they've written good take, good take, good take, good. I'm like, I got 5 good takes versus like, this is the one, and I can confirm that on the day, or my own thoughts of like, okay, well, the director says this is the take. I think this might be the take. So now I know these things. I think if you can't be on set, and I understand why in some cases that's just not possible, especially right now with everybody working remotely, I think it's really important to make sure that production gives you time code, because it's so much easier to do this stuff when you have proper time code, especially when you're, in that sort of very tedious, boring process of syncing stuff. If you've got time code on your footage and time code in your audio, there are automated tools that can marry those instantly. And if there's not, and you have to do it manually, again, it's like you can waste an entire day just syncing material, which is like, that's not worth anybody's time. Like if I'm a producer, I don't want to be paying someone to literally be doing that. It's not worth it. So, take the extra few seconds on set to make sure that you've got time. And also too, that I would say too, is recording production audio on your camera, so that if the time code fails, you can still use those automated tools, which, match via waveform or whatever. That's super helpful. I've done a couple commercials where for whatever reason they did that, and I had to manually sync everything, and it was fine. Like I'm happy to do it, but it was just one of those situations where even the client was like, why don't we have a cut yet? You normally have a cut out the door by now. I'm like, well, I had to sync everything. Like I literally had to spend a day syncing all this footage. I haven't been able to actually start editing yet. So those two things are really important. And yeah, just like a good communication, and a lot of the clients that I work with, I've been working with them for years. So we have a really good rapport. I know what they're looking for, they know what I'm looking for, and we were able to just work so much quicker because of that. And that's partly why they like, when I can be on set, they want me to be, just because they know the benefit that they're going to get out of that. But we also recognize that that's just not always possible. So
Yeah. So if I can ask, just for my own selfish reasons, What is it like to just be in a room with a filmmaker like Damien Chazelle, just talking about his craft? Do you have any stories or musings or general observations or anything you want to share about being in a room with modern filmmakers who are just making the best of the best?
It is a very, very surreal moment. Because and it's weird because I have been very lucky in that I've gotten to interview or be in the room for interviews with what, for lack of a better term, you would refer to as a celebrity. But then I've also got to be in the room with someone that maybe wouldn't be a household name, but is someone that I, as a filmmaker, respect immensely. And I find that way more nerve wracking. Like, when we did an interview with like Kate Winslet and Idris Elba, it was very cool, and it was cool to meet them and shake their hands and all that. But I wasn't nervous because it's like, well, they're just here, they're doing their thing. But being in the room with Alex Gibney, a professional documentary filmmaker, and his job is to ask questions, and now I'm gonna have to be in this room and ask him questions for 30 minutes. I was terrified because it's like, oh my, like this guy asks questions for a living. I do not want to do a bad job. So it's kind of funny how like you get nervous about things differently depending on who the person is and what they're doing. But yeah, it's just such like, it's probably the coolest part of this job is the people I've got to meet and speak to, or just sit in on conversations with them, and how much I've learned from those. There are definitely filmmakers that we've spoken to that, for whatever reason, we only get 15, 20, 30 minutes with them. But you very much get the feeling that if time was of no meaning and they didn't have to be somewhere else, they could sit and talk for 2 hours. I could certainly sit and talk for 2 hours. And that's such a cool experience. They're always very gracious with their time, always very gracious with their answers. And the best thing that someone can say when they're leaving, to me anyways, is those were really great questions. And I hope that they're being genuine when they ask or when they say that, but there's been a couple instances where I really got the feeling that they were not getting questions that they're used to getting, because they're, most people would just be like, so what was it like working with so-and-so? Or like, tell me about, that. Whereas we're trying to dig deeper into the craft and all of filmmaking and talking film with filmmakers. Like, we're all big nerds. And I think they get a kick out of getting to do that. And certainly I get a kick out of getting to do that. So yeah, that's like I said, it's certainly the coolest part of my job, and not something that I even knew was going to be a part of my job when I got the job. I knew that obviously TIFF did interviews, but I never thought that I would be involved in the actual interview process. It was like, oh, I'll probably just have to film them or whatever. But yeah, getting that experience of getting to sit down and have a one-on-one conversation with a filmmaker I admire and whose work has influenced my own, like that is just the coolest feeling in the world. So,
you talked about shaking hands with Kate Winslet and Idris Elba. We can't really do that anymore. So can you talk a bit about when TIFF went fully virtual for the first time last year? What was that experience like, especially for a production the size of TIFF? What were some of the challenges, and how did you and your team pivot to essentially work in a completely new environment?
Yeah, I mean, it was a huge shift, and so many people were involved, and I think I don't know that we were necessarily the first of the big festivals to go digital, but I think just based on the timeline of everything, we might have been like among the first. And so it was very much a learning experience. Like, there was no template to follow. We didn't have other festivals that we could get in touch with and be like, what did you guys do? Like, it was just, we got to figure this all out. So like, obviously the biggest shift was like, how do we put on a festival digitally? And so there was figuring out the platform, figuring out how to do that was a task that our web team handled, along with like obviously the tech team and various people throughout the organization, and they just knocked it out of the park. It was amazing. I got to actually sit at home and watch films during the festival, which I never get to do usually because I'm so busy. I maybe get to see like one film or maybe two, but because of this fact that we could watch them from home, like I actually got to see a lot more, which was great. But for our team, yeah, it was really about, we knew that we weren't going to have the same access to talent that we would in a regular year. But ironically, it meant that we kind of had more access, because what we ended up doing was we did online Q&As with talent and filmmakers. And normally in a regular year, you only get to speak with the people who are able to fly into Toronto and be there in person. But now, people can sit at home and do this. So we had almost essentially unlimited access. I don't think there was a single film that didn't end up having a Q&A. I'm pretty sure I could be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure close to, if not all titles, ended up having a Q&A, be it with the director or the cast or, somebody representing the film. And in some cases, I remember we did I did a Q&A with, or four, I should say, Shadow in the Cloud, which was a New Zealand production, and the director was in New Zealand, and it was Chloe Grace Moretz, and I guess she was in LA, and they had not seen each other since they wrapped. And that was the other cool thing, was there were a number of these Q&As where the cast and crew, because of COVID, had not seen each other since they wrapped. So it was kind of like a party atmosphere for them. They're all at home, but they're like, this is the first time we've seen you since this is so exciting. So it was really neat that we got to bring these people together in a way that they previously hadn't been. But obviously that was a huge undertaking. Most of our August was spent, conducting these interviews. People are all over the world, so we're conducting them at all hours of the day. There were some, I got up at 5 a.m. to do one because they were based in China or whatever. And then there were some that I was doing at 10 o'clock at night. So yeah, it was a whirlwind. And again, we'd never done this before. We kind of didn't really know what to expect. But I would say for our team, that was sort of the biggest undertaking and learning curve, was okay, how are we going to conduct 50 Q&As, all remote, all via remote, and do it all within the compressed timeline that we have. And then again, it was also, putting together a wrap-up trailer. I still was doing that, but how do you approach that when it's a mixture of in person, online, and I'm at home? I didn't, how are we going to do this? So there was a lot of logistics of, okay, well, we've got people, they'll shoot it, they'll offload it, they'll put it on a drive, they'll call an Uber, and then it will Uber it to my house. In some cases, we were doing stuff but just because of the turnaround time, and as video files, they aren't tiny. So sometimes, because of that turnaround, we had to work so quickly. We knew it was actually going to be a lot faster to just put them on a drive and drive them to my house than it would be to wait for them to upload and then for me to download. And so it was a lot of learning curves and figuring out the best approach. And in the end, I don't think the end product really suffered and anyone would necessarily notice. But yeah, it was a very, very different atmosphere and experience. But at the same time, also kind of nice. As I said, when in previous years, it was, very, very long hours at the office. I don't actually live in downtown Toronto. I live in the suburbs. So it's then commuting back and forth or staying at a friend's house. Whereas now I'm at home. I got to have dinner with my family. I got to eat real food and not just takeout the whole time. So it was kind of a nice change. Although I also, really wished I was downtown at, it is the best part of the year. So it was one of those, it was a silver lining, but also it was, I wished we were not under those circumstances, but you find the ways to make the best of it for sure.
You are a creative professional working with other creative professionals. What is it like to have creative collaboration when your team is based everywhere and anywhere?
Yeah, it's definitely the thing that I think all of us have struggled with the most. Obviously from the outset, it was just figuring out, well, how are we even going to do this? All of our material is at the office and we're not allowed to go there. How do we do this? And thankfully, in the week leading up to the ultimate shutdown, I just had a gut feeling that things were sort of not going to be great. And so I set up some stuff at the office so that I could remote into my computer at the office. And thankfully, I'm so glad I did do that because, yeah, sure enough, a week later, it was yep, nobody's coming to the office. Go, you're not allowed in. So we did set up some infrastructure so that we could work remotely, but it was still figuring out the best way to do that. The biggest thing, like you said, is how do you collaborate with others? And in terms of revisions and stuff like that, that's pretty straightforward. We always uploaded our stuff to Frame.io and sent links out to the various people in the organization who have to watch stuff. Like, people didn't usually just watch it in our office. So we were used to that. Like, that didn't really change things. Sometimes, obviously, like, yes, it would have been nice to be able to be in a room with someone to go through those revisions or notes or what have you. I did a commercial early in the pandemic last year that was definitely the biggest struggle. Was like, we all so badly just wanted to be in the room together to try different things, and you're doing it over Zoom and screen sharing, and there's kind of a lag and it doesn't look super great. And I think a lot of those kinks have sort of been worked out since. I actually I cut a promo for a TV series about a month ago, and it was, when I say it was 100% remote, I never touched a piece of footage here at home. I literally dialed into a computer and was remote editing on their system from my system. So all the footage was at their offices, and it was like I was just screen sharing, no lag, like, it was pretty incredible. It was I went into it being like, there's no way this is going to work. This is going to be so, and it was pretty seamless. Like, the only way I could tell was the fact that because my laptop and my second monitor aren't the same, like, display resolution. So when I stretched the window across, like, it showed a little bit of the desktop on the other window. But otherwise, yeah, like, if I had two identical monitors, it would have been completely seamless and you would have no idea. So the technology has, by, the necessity of this past year, has sort of, I think, kept up with that. But yeah, I mean, we also took advantage of the Post Lab. I don't know if you're familiar with that tool, but it's
I've heard of Post Lab.
Yeah, so it's a collaboration tool that allows you. It's actually kind of neat, and we didn't fully take advantage of its full amount of features, but we were editing these reels for the TIFF tribute ceremony. And I, again, like, just because there was so much material to go through, I couldn't go through it all myself. So we had an assistant editor. And basically what he did was he had his project at his place, and he would basically check the project out using Post Lab, do his work, check it back in, say what the notes were. Then I could pull it down to my system. And it basically just allowed us to collaborate on a project without, having to worry about, like, zipping files and sending them via email. Like, everything was consolidated in that workflow. And so that was super helpful. And it was something that, like, I would love to continue to use, because now they've added features for storing footage so that, like, neither of us would have had to have a copy of the footage here. It would all live in the cloud and pull down as necessary. So it seems really, really powerful and really impressive. And I've only scratched the surface of what it could do, but that was really, really helpful for doing those sort of collaborative edits. Because generally the way we work at TIFF is, like, a producer is assigned to a project and they sort of take it from start to finish. There's not a lot of, like, back and forth. Whereas this project, just because of the scope, like, we needed to have a bit more back and forth with other people. So that was really helpful. Yeah, it's just like, it was really a learning curve and a learning game. But the nice thing was we sort of had that runway in March and April to iron out all of those issues, and then by the time we were in full production mode, like, everything was kind of smoothed out. And then when we got to the festival, like I said, we sort of encountered on the fly, we're like, oh, this is saying it's going to take 6 hours to upload this stuff, and I know based on my bandwidth it's probably going to take me, maybe an hour to download. Let's put it on a drive, throw it in an Uber, it'll be here in 45 minutes. That's a much smoother process. So yeah, there are the things that we had to, like, learn on the fly, but for the most part, it went pretty smoothly. But there's no denying that I think all of us, as much as we like working from home, some of us more than others, those of us who have 2-hour commutes really like working from home. As much as we like that, there's nothing like being collaborative in a room with other people, and that really is the best way to work. But I have been really impressed with how efficiently and how effectively we can work remotely. And I think that's really going to change post-production in general. Like, it's really interesting to see how this will affect production moving forward.
Yeah, no, there's definitely a big change coming down the horizon. But now that you've had a year of remote video production under your belt, potentially a second, what improvements are you looking to make to your own remote setup to be more efficient?
we're such a close knit team. We work so well together, and we really do. We collaborate really well. So it's like it's kind of a well-oiled machine now, even though we are working remotely. I mean, the biggest thing obviously is having good, solid internet and a hardwired internet connection, and having just like the IT infrastructure to be able to do this. I ended up buying, just because of the timeline and everything. I bought a new MacBook at the start of the pandemic because my old one was on its last legs, and it was fine for the very few bits of editing work I was doing at home. But if I knowing full well that we were going to be at home sort of indefinitely, I was like, I think I'd been waiting to upgrade it. Now's my excuse. Um, so yeah, but I mean, it's really, I think, yeah, we've kind of got it down to a science at this point, and obviously that's based on the kind of work that we're doing. I don't think with the setup that we are currently using, we would be able to edit a full TV series. Um, and I leave that up to the people who are much smarter than me to figure that out. But yeah, I think we've adapted really well, and we sort of we're good at coming up with solutions as needed. So hopefully going into the next year, and we'll hopefully all start moving back to the office soon, or splitting our time. I think that will maybe be the next sort of thing to figure out, is like if it's a combination of remote and in office, like how do you work around that? Because that's sort of the benefit of the last year, was like it was strictly work from home. So all of your material, you had it at your home office because that was your new office. But like when you're now having to travel to and from, how do you make sure that you have the material that you need in both places? So I think there are still some things that we will have to, and I say we meaning people who work in post-production, not just TIFF. There are certain things that we'll all sort of have to figure out, but I also have no doubt that there will be solutions presented because of this. Like I said, something like Post Lab, I haven't taken full advantage of it, but I know that it has things that would help immensely with that sort of splitting your time between two locations, because that's what it's designed to do. Only those two locations happen to be two different editors, but if your two locations are just home in the office, you'll be able to do that as well. So I think there are definitely solutions out there that we can find. It's just, and it's been great that so many people are so open about their, the thing I love about Twitter for what I do and what we do, we're having this conversation because of social media, but it's just like, so people are so gracious with their time and answering questions. And if I have a question, I will just tweet it out, and someone will either answer it or retweet it, and it will find its way to someone who can answer it. There's very few times when I can't come up with a solution via that sort of social media connections that we all have. So yeah, it's been great. I've learned a lot through that. I've learned about software and tools that I now use daily because of social media. So it's been really great to learn how other people, what their workflows look like, and how I can adapt those to my workflow. And I'm hopeful that will just continue after this weird year, or year and a half, I guess we're almost at now, is over. But
And can I ask what your hardware setup is at home? Like what softwares you use and what devices you use?
yeah, I mean, I sort of touched on a lot of it, but yeah, it's I've got a MacBook Pro. I mean, I was toying with buying a desktop machine, but I'm someone who I love the ability, whether or not I do so, but I love the ability to work wherever. I have some clients where, again, they like me to, back in the old days when we could go places, I would go to their offices for a day or two and work there. So having a portable machine and a portable hard drive that's fast enough to carry all your material, like, that's great. So yeah, so I have a MacBook Pro. I'm working with a G Technology RAID is my RAID that I use for work, and it has all of our work on it. And then software wise, we generally, all the other editors at work use Premiere, but I prefer Final Cut Pro, so I'm using a mix of both. Again, it sort of just depends on the type of project that I'm working on and what I need to do. I really like Final Cut Pro for its organization, but also for it's like film strip view. So if you're making a trailer of a bunch of different films and you're working from full film files, it's a lot easier to find shots when you can visually see them all laid out in front of you than if it's just like a big long timeline. Like I said, Post Lab, we worked with that a little bit. Frame.io we use for our internal review, and as well as just sort of passing files back and forth between the office and home. Google Drive, sort of all the sort of stuff that everybody kind of uses. It's the kind of stuff I use. Dropbox is super useful and helpful. A couple of other things in my toolkit that I don't necessarily use for TIFF, but use on my other projects was Shot Notes X. You mentioned that you watched that library video I put on YouTube. That's one of the tools I used to get those Excel sheets that I wrote on set, getting those notes into Final Cut Pro basically with a few clicks. Sync and Link is another piece of software. That's what I use to get my audio files and my video files merged together with a couple clicks. When Final Cut Pro 10 came out, a lot of professionals sort of poo-pooed it because they were calling it like iMovie Pro, and they're like, they pulled out all these features that we use, and it kind of got a bad rap. But over the last, I think it's almost been 10 years now, they've, Apple has slowly but surely improved it and added features back in. And then the thing I really like is that some of the stuff they took out, third parties came along to fill that void, but I actually kind of prefer that because when things break, it's a lot easier to get in touch with a third-party developer than it is to get in touch with Apple. I don't know if you've ever tried to talk to Apple support. Getting in touch with the person you need to get in touch with, very difficult. Whereas I was working on an edit where something wasn't working quite right, and I was pretty sure it was related to the third-party tool. It was like a Sunday afternoon. I sent an email to the developer in hopes that they would maybe get back to me in the next couple of days. They got back to me within a couple hours. And within a day or two, they had a new version pushed to the App Store that fixed the problem. So, I think there's some benefit to relying on third-party tools for certain things because, like I said, that developer community is so tight-knit. They're really dedicated, and you actually can get in touch with someone, and that is great. So, yeah, that's kind of and then obviously, there's tons of different plugins and stuff that I use, like the Isotope, is it Isotope? I think that's the company, but the RX Tools kit that allows you to do audio restoration, that's we use that a lot, especially when you're cleaning up these sort of remote interviews and stuff. That's helpful for fixing mic distortion, stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, there's just, it's hard to remember all the things that I use daily. I had to reinstall a bunch of stuff on my computer recently, and I had to go through that process of okay, what are all the things that I need to make sure that I install? So yeah, but I use a lot of the stuff that everybody else uses. I don't really have any real secret tools in my tool belt, but it's just the tools that I have. I use every day, and I know them like the back of my hand. Although there's still tons of stuff to learn always. So.
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, actually, at TIFF, you produce a lot of live broadcasts. Is live streaming something that is foreign to you, or are you familiar with it? What softwares do you prefer, and how did you get yourself up and running?
Yeah, we had done live streaming at TIFF before, but it was handled by a different team, and it was not something that I personally had experience with. And when we decided we were going to start doing this, we kind of had to figure out the best tool. We had started off, or not our team, but the social team was just using Instagram Live, and that was great, but it was kind of limited, and it required you to be on Instagram to watch it. So they really wanted a solution that allowed us to simulcast to Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. And so that's when we sort of decided, okay, we got to come up with a different solution. And so I did a bunch of research, and we hit upon this service called StreamYard. That's what we were using and have been using, and it's great. Other companies were using Zoom. I didn't want to use Zoom because I didn't like the lack of control that it provided. StreamYard was great because it was you didn't have to install any software. You literally just went to a website, and everything was there at your fingertips. It allowed you to simulcast really easily. It was really designed to be as simple as possible. So it was just, our first live simulcast that we did was with Guillermo del Toro, and I remember it was just it was one of those days where I crossed all my fingers and toes that it was going to work. There were no issues, and when I hit the stop button, it was I let out the biggest sigh of relief because okay, goodness, it's over, it's fine. And now we're old, it's old hat, and we're used to it, and we know how to deal with problems as they come up and stuff. But yeah, it was definitely a learning curve, and it was very much a sort of learn on the fly and figure it out as you go. And doing those 50 Q&As last year, we encountered every possible technical problem you could imagine. We had to figure out how to solve them, and a lot of them were solved obviously in post-production. But yeah, it was definitely a learning experience that was super beneficial, and I really love doing it. It's something that I never had done before, and now I've really taken to it, and I've started learning new skills. And I'm not saying that I'm going to start becoming a Twitch streamer, because that's a whole other kettle of fish, but I definitely have looked into buying one of those cool like control surface decks. I can't remember the name of the brand that like all the Twitch streamers use, but that have all the buttons and the jog dial. And like I really would love to get something like that, but they're a little out of my price range right now. But yeah, like it's been really cool to build this skill and to not feel, everyone says during the pandemic, like, don't feel badly if you didn't like, write the next great novel. But I'm glad that I'm coming out of it with a new skill in my tool belt that I didn't have before. It kind of makes it feel like it was not, an entire year wasted or whatever. So.
All right, Adam, I got one last question for you, and it's an important one. So I know you're a movie fan, and through my internet sleuthing, I also know that you are a cocktail fan. So which movie are you looking most forward to this year, and which cocktail would you suggest as a pairing for that movie?
So, I mean, obviously we touched on it already last night in Soho. I'm very, very excited for that. But so I had tickets to the first screening in IMAX opening day of No Time to Die, the new James Bond movie. I know this is not like the cool, he works at TIFF, he loves art fit. Like, this is not a cool, like, this is a very pedestrian movie. I understand that, but I have been a big James Bond fan since I was a little kid. And ever since Daniel Craig became James Bond, it was, I've been there opening day. So I had my ticket, and obviously it got pushed because of COVID, and then I got pushed again, and now I think it's opening in November. So and of course, I'm also going to have a 6-month-old child at that point, but I've already spoken with my wife, and she agrees. No, I can take the night off. I can go see James Bond in IMAX downtown. Hopefully there will still be IMAX theaters by that point.
Right, right.
But that is the one I am most looking forward to. And so because it's James Bond, like the pairing I would have to say is a vodka martini shaken not stirred. Of course, I don't know if I'll be able to get that in an IMAX theater, but I
Just
did
smuggle it in.
They did I don't know if they do a touring thing where you can see movies with like live orchestras.
Oh right,
and
yeah.
It was in Toronto a couple years ago, and I saw Casino Royale with a live orchestra. But because it's in an actual like theater, you could get a dry martini shaken not stirred. And I can honestly say there's nothing quite like watching James Bond live orchestra martini, and it is a unique experience that I highly, highly recommend. So yeah, I know that's not it's not a very cool answer to say the James Bond movie, but that is definitely the one that I will be making the trek out to see no matter what. Let's just hope it doesn't get pushed again, because it's literally been over a year that I've waited since the original release date now. So
yeah, it's almost a running joke at this point. It's the one movie that keeps getting pushed back. At least with Fast 9, they announced right from the get-go they're going to wait an entire year. But with James Bond, it was, okay, no, we'll push it by a couple of weeks. Okay, by 3 months. No, by 6 months. Now it's a whole year.
Kept being hopeful, and I was really worried that they were gonna be like, okay, we're doing it. And because theaters are still not open in Canada, at least at the time of this recording. And I was really nervous. I was like, well, I don't want this to come out when I can't see it. Like, I want to see it in IMAX. I do not want to sit and watch it at home. I want to see it in an IMAX theater with a ton of other people, as loud and as big as possible. So yes, I am very, very hopeful that actually does happen. But so fingers crossed November comes and I will be seeing James Bond. But
yeah, man, no, it's Craig's last hurrah. You have to support him. No, I think it's a great pick. Adam, questions wise for me, I'm all out. Do you have anything else to add in terms of talking about movies or film festivals, TIFF, or remote video production in general? Just let me know.
No, I mean, thank you so much for asking me to do this. It's been such a pleasure talking to you. I know I have a tendency to ramble, so I do apologize to everyone who has sat through this and or the person editing it, trying to get it down. But yeah, no, this has been great. It's been it's funny. I keep saying, like, whenever I get to do these sort of things, it's always just nice to see and talk to other people, because it's been a year of sitting in my office at home and not interacting with others. So even if it's over Zoom.
No, the connection is there. Adam, Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me, especially during your busy TIFF schedule. I apologize if I took way too much of your time. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I hope we can chat again sometime soon. If not, I'll catch you on Twitter, and yeah, I'll see you then. Bye.
You too. Take care. Bye.